The mother-in-law smirked the moment the lawyer opened the file. She sneered. He probably left her a pile of debts and some cheap belongings. The whole family laughed, including her husband. They never saw Isabella as anything. But when the lawyer read aloud, "All assets, shares, and real estate worth hundreds of millions are left to his only daughter, Isabella Monroe," the entire room froze. The mother-in-law's smile vanished. Her husband turned pale. Everyone trembled as they stared at the woman they had humiliated. Have you ever witnessed a reversal this brutal? Comment where you're watching from and please support the channel for more story. Isabella Monroe sat at the long mahogany dining table, her hands resting lightly on her lap as if she were afraid to disturb the silence that ruled the Whitmore mansion every Sunday night. She had learned to control every gesture, every breath, as though stillness could make her invisible. Yet even in silence, she could feel the weight of the room pressing down on her, a reminder that she did not belong here in the way this family believed she should. She had chosen a simple, elegant navy dress that complemented her warm skin and graceful posture. It was the kind of dress that reflected her personality, quiet confidence, not ostentation. But to the Whitmores, simplicity was a flaw, something to poke at whenever conversation ran dry. Victoria Whitmore, her mother-in-law, sat across from her with a posture stiff enough to break. The older woman was tall, sharply dressed, and carried an air of constant disapproval. Everything about her radiated entitlement. Beside her, Clarissa Whitmore, Ethan's sister, twirled a strand of perfectly curled hair as she scrolled through her phone, pretending boredom while waiting for the next opportunity to sting. Ethan Whitmore, Isabella's husband, occupied the seat at the head of the table. His expression was calm but distant, the look of a man who wanted harmony but lacked the courage to protect it. She had once believed that he simply chose peace over conflict. Lately, she had begun to wonder if he simply chose himself. Dinner was served by the staff, and as the plates were placed before them, the familiar tension settled over the table like dust. Victoria broke the silence first. "I suppose I'll have to start interviewing new chefs again," she said, placing her napkin on her lap with exaggerated grace. "It is so hard to find someone who understands refined taste. Most people simply cannot rise to the standards of this family." Her eyes drifted toward Isabella, deliberate and slow. Isabella kept her expression neutral. She had heard this kind of comment too many times to react. Clarissa leaned forward with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. "Speaking of taste, look at the bag I picked up yesterday." She lifted a white designer handbag from beside her chair and placed it on the table as if it were a precious artifact. "Limited edition, impossible to find." She turned to Isabella. "Oh, but I forgot. Things like this aren't really your style, are they?" Ethan's fork paused mid-air, but he said nothing. Isabella replied softly, "It's lovely, Clarissa." "Of course it is," Clarissa said, laughing lightly. "Some people just need to be born into the right environment to appreciate these things." Victoria nodded in satisfaction, as if her daughter had delivered a profound truth. The conversation continued with small jabs disguised as polite chatter. Each remark from Victoria or Clarissa circled the same target: Isabella's background, her upbringing, her lack of pedigree. Isabella had long understood that the point was not the words themselves, but the pleasure they took in saying them. She lifted her glass of water to her lips, keeping her movement steady. Victoria spoke again, this time with a theatrical sigh. "Our foundation is expanding this year. It would be nice if everyone in the family had the proper understanding of wealth to represent us adequately." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, it's true," Victoria insisted, glancing again at Isabella. "Some things cannot be taught. Class is one of them." Ethan gave a small, awkward smile. "She only means well, Isabella. Don't be so sensitive." For the first time that evening, something flickered in Isabella's eyes. She looked at her husband, truly looked at him. His expression held no malice, only indifference, and somehow that hurt far more. "I'm not being sensitive," she said quietly. Ethan shrugged. "Let's just keep the peace tonight." Isabella pressed her lips together, swallowing the sting in her chest. Keeping the peace was something she had done since the day she married into this family. She had tried silence, diplomacy, and patience. None of it earned her respect. If anything, it made her invisible. The dinner dragged on until the plates were nearly empty. Finally, Ethan excused himself to answer a phone call from work, leaving her alone with Victoria and Clarissa. As Isabella stood to gather her plate, Victoria rose as well. Their paths crossed near the doorway. Victoria leaned in, lowering her voice to a cold whisper. "At least you know your place in this house." Isabella froze for half a second. It was not the first insult. It would not be the last. But something about the certainty in Victoria's tone, so confident, so absolute, cut through her like a blade. Victoria walked away without waiting for a response. Isabella carried her plate to the kitchen herself, even though the staff normally would have done it. She paused beside the sink, the vast marble countertop glinting under the chandelier's warm light. The kitchen felt enormous, too bright, too quiet. She placed the plate down and exhaled. She did not cry. She did not tremble. She stood still, absorbing the chill that clung to the walls of the Whitmore mansion. She thought about each remark, each dismissive smile, each moment Ethan looked away. She thought about the woman she had been before she entered this house. A woman with dreams, a woman with purpose. Something inside her shifted. She opened her eyes, steady and calm. Silence was no longer submission. It was preparation. And one day soon, the Whitmores would learn that she did not break quietly. The Whitmore mansion was unusually loud the next morning, filled with the sound of footsteps, rustling garment bags, and the excited chatter of Victoria and Clarissa. The annual Whitmore Charity Gala was only hours away, and for this family, it was the most important social event of the year. It was a stage where they could shine, perform, and remind everyone of their influence. Isabella Monroe stood near the staircase, adjusting the cuff of her blouse as she watched Victoria sweep through the hallway, with a seamstress trailing behind. The older woman's energy was sharp and focused, as if preparing for a royal coronation rather than a charity event. Clarissa followed behind her mother, holding 2 designer dresses over her arm. She walked with the poised arrogance of a woman who had always been praised for her beauty and connections. "Spotting Isabella," she offered a smile that was far too bright to be sincere. "Oh, Isabella," Clarissa said, stopping in front of her. "Mother and I are heading out to pick up our final fittings. You should probably start getting ready, too. It would be embarrassing if you showed up looking unprepared." Victoria glanced over, her lips curling slightly. "Yes. Appearances matter tonight. We cannot afford any missteps." Isabella nodded lightly. "I understand. Neither Victoria nor Clarissa invited her to join them. They simply stepped past her and disappeared out the front door, leaving Isabella standing alone in the foyer." She let out a slow breath. Their message was clear. She was included only when it served them. Tonight, she was expected to stand quietly at Ethan's side, smile politely, and stay out of the way. Ethan entered the hall moments later, adjusting his cufflinks. His expression was distracted, as if he had slept well despite the tension of the night before. When he saw Isabella, he paused. "Are you ready for tonight?" he asked. "As ready as I can be," she replied. He smiled without meeting her eyes. "Just remember, this event is important to my mother. Try not to take anything she says too personally." A familiar ache settled in Isabella's chest. "I'll keep that in mind." Ethan kissed her cheek absently and left for a meeting. The house fell quiet again. Later that afternoon, Victoria and Clarissa returned carrying glossy shopping bags and new gowns. They called Isabella into the living room where the dresses were laid out like trophies. Clarissa lifted a pale pink dress from the sofa. "Here," she said cheerfully. You can wear this tonight. I used it last year, but it's still in excellent condition, and the color should be safe on you. Isabella touched the fabric. It was beautiful, but worn around the edges. She remembered Clarissa's photos from last year's gala. The younger woman had spilled champagne on the hem of this very dress. There was no accident in the choice. "Thank you," Isabella said softly. She was not thanking them for the dress. She was thanking herself for maintaining self-control. She turned away before Victoria could add another comment. In her room, she laid the dress on her bed and exhaled slowly. Her phone buzzed. The caller ID revealed the one person who never treated her like she was small, her longtime friend and mentor, Charlotte Pierce. Isabella pressed the phone to her ear. "Charlotte, your voice sounds tight," Charlotte said. "Tell me what happened." Isabella sat on the edge of her bed looking at the dress. "Nothing new, just the same roles I'm expected to play." Charlotte was silent for a moment. "And what role are you choosing?" Isabella's fingers trailed across the fabric. "The one that requires patience and preparation," Charlotte added gently. "You always were the sharpest strategist in the room. Do not let them shrink you." "I won't," Isabella said. Her voice was calm, almost steady. That evening, the entire family gathered at the entrance of the mansion. Victoria and Clarissa stood radiant in their designer gowns, glittering under the chandelier. Ethan looked polished and composed, though his brief glance toward Isabella held awkwardness. Isabella stepped forward in the pink dress. It fit her well, though she could feel the faint pull where the fabric had been repaired. Still, she held her posture with quiet dignity. At the gala, the vast ballroom shimmered with gold light. The sound of soft music floated through the air as guests drifted around in clusters. People from influential families, wealthy donors, and senior executives greeted one another with practiced charm. Victoria immediately slipped into hostess mode, smiling elegantly while guiding guests toward photo opportunities and important conversations. She made sure to stand beside powerful figures and position herself in the center of every moment. Clarissa clung to a group of young socialites, laughing loudly as if already performing for an invisible audience. Isabella walked beside Ethan, though he rarely acknowledged her presence. Every time she attempted to speak to a guest, someone cut her off with a sidelong glance or a polite nod before shifting their attention elsewhere. A middle-aged woman with a diamond necklace approached Victoria. "Your family looks wonderful tonight," she said, "and this must be your daughter-in-law." Before Isabella could introduce herself, Victoria responded with a gentle laugh. "Yes, Isabella. She comes from a very simple background, but we've done our best to help her adjust." The woman nodded, her smile stiff. Isabella's fingers tightened around her clutch. She felt the familiar sting, but tonight she was not shaken. She had already learned how to breathe through it. Later, as she stood near a column, Clarissa approached her with a smirk. "Careful with your posture," she whispered. "You don't want people to get the wrong idea." Isabella looked at her. And what idea would that be? Clarissa blinked, surprised by the calm challenge. "Just try not to embarrass us." Isabella wanted to walk away, but the moment shifted abruptly when Victoria marched toward them, her face full of irritation. "Isabella!" Victoria snapped. "You should not stand in the middle of the walkway. People need space. I was just—" "Do not talk back to me," Victoria hissed. Isabella inhaled quietly. "I wasn't talking back. I was explaining." Victoria's voice rose, her anger swelling. "You have nothing to explain. You have nothing at all. Do you understand me? Nothing." Several guests nearby turned their heads. Clarissa froze, suddenly aware of the eyes watching. Ethan hurried toward them, whispering urgently, "Mother, lower your voice." Victoria ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on Isabella with fierce contempt. Isabella stepped back. Her heart beat steadily, not fast. She stared at Victoria, memorizing every detail. She did not speak. She did not bow her head. She simply held Victoria's gaze until Ethan pulled her away from the scene, whispering apologies that meant nothing. The car ride home was silent. Isabella looked out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. She no longer felt fear, she felt clarity. Everything had crossed a final line. Her phone buzzed. A new message glowed across the screen. "Everything is ready for tomorrow, Miss Monroe." Isabella closed her eyes briefly. Tomorrow would bring a different world, and the Whitmores had no idea what awaited them. The next morning, the Whitmore family gathered in the foyer of their mansion, irritated and confused as they prepared to leave for an unexpected appointment. The message from the law office had been brief and formal, requesting the presence of the entire family for an important reading. No further explanation was given. Ethan paced near the front door, adjusting his tie for the third time. His expression held mild annoyance more than concern. Victoria and Clarissa stood together, whispering as if the inconvenience itself was an offense. Isabella watched them quietly. She had dressed in a simple cream blouse and tailored pants, her expression composed. The message from her lawyer, Harrison Blake, echoed in her mind. "Everything is ready for tomorrow, Miss Monroe." Now she understood why the meeting had been arranged with such urgency. Ethan finally stopped pacing and turned toward his wife. "Do you know what this is about?" he asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes searched her face. "I was asked to attend as well," Isabella replied. "I assume we will find out soon enough." He nodded, seeming satisfied with the half-answer. He never questioned what he did not want to understand. The car ride to the law office was quiet. Victoria complained about the terrible timing. Clarissa checked her reflection repeatedly, convinced that any unexpected appointment required her to be flawless. Ethan answered a few work messages. Isabella sat by the window, watching the city pass by. Her heartbeat was steady. She felt the shift in the air, subtle but powerful, like a tide turning in her favor. The Whitmore car pulled into the parking space of the tall office building. A receptionist welcomed them and guided the family to a private conference room. It was furnished with leather chairs, polished wood, and a large window that spilled soft daylight across the table. Mr. Harrison Blake stood waiting near the head of the table. He was a man in his early 50s with intelligent eyes and a calm professionalism. He had been Isabella's legal advisor for years, long before she married Ethan. The Whitmores did not know that. They only knew him as a reputable attorney who had summoned them. "Good morning," Mr. Blake said as he extended his hand. "Thank you all for coming." Ethan shook his hand politely. "Can we get this over with? We have a busy day ahead." Mr. Blake offered a small, unreadable smile. "Of course, please take your seats." Everyone settled around the table. Isabella chose a chair slightly apart from the others, but close enough to hear everything clearly. She could feel Victoria's eyes on her, suspicious, but unaware. Mr. Blake placed a thick folder on the table. "Before we begin, I want to express my gratitude for your cooperation. What we are about to discuss concerns a long-standing client of mine whose final wishes must now be honored." Victoria lifted her chin. "Which relative is this about? Someone on our side of the family?" She turned to Ethan. "Your father mentioned a distant cousin with a trust. Perhaps it is that." Mr. Blake looked directly at Victoria, then at Ethan, and finally at Isabella. His voice was steady. "We are here today to read the last will and testament of Robert Monroe, father of Ms. Isabella Monroe." The air left the room in a single instant. Victoria blinked as if she had misheard. "I am sorry. Whose father?" "Ms. Monroe's father," Mr. Blake repeated calmly. "Robert Monroe was my client for more than a decade." Clarissa's mouth fell slightly open, but he was not wealthy. He could not have been. Ethan turned to his wife, waiting for her to look back at him. She did not. Her gaze remained on the attorney. Mr. Blake continued, "Mr. Monroe lived privately by choice. His career as a technological inventor allowed him to sell several patents early in his life. The proceeds were invested systematically. His estate has grown significantly over the years. Victoria stiffened. How significantly? Mr. Blake opened the folder and began reading. Mr. Monroe leaves behind extensive stock portfolios, majority shares in 2 emerging tech companies, commercial properties in 3 major cities, and several high-value investment accounts. Ethan's eyes widened. What are we talking about? Millions? Mr. Blake looked him straight in the eye. Hundreds of millions. A stunned silence fell over the room. Clarissa swallowed hard. For her, all of it. Yes, Mr. Blake replied. Ms. Monroe is the sole beneficiary. Ethan stared at Isabella as if seeing her for the first time. A mix of disbelief, confusion, and a flicker of greed crossed his expression. Victoria leaned forward. Why would he give all of this to her? She never mentioned such wealth. She did not know the full amount herself, Mr. Blake said. Mr. Monroe wanted his daughter to build her own life without pressure or expectation. His instructions were explicit. Everything belongs to Miss Monroe, all rights, all control, all assets. He slid a neatly bound packet toward Isabella. These documents outline the full valuation and transfer procedures. My team will assist you with every detail. Isabella reached out and took the packet with steady hands. For a moment she felt her father's presence near her, not in wealth, but in intention. He had trusted her, believed in her, and prepared her for this day in ways she was only now beginning to understand. Victoria finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. There must be a mistake. You expect us to believe that she is now? Mr. Pass. Blake lifted his eyes to hers. I expect you to believe the truth. The room grew heavy with silence. Each Whitmore processed the revelation differently. Victoria looked pale, the confidence drained from her posture. Clarissa stared at the table, her fingers trembling slightly. Ethan watched Isabella with an intensity she had never seen in him before. She saw the fear behind his eyes and beneath it, the hunger he tried to hide. For once, she was not invisible. She was undeniable. Mr. Blake gestured to the documents. Please take a moment to review these if you wish. All the details are clearly outlined. Victoria remained frozen. Clarissa leaned forward slightly, her eyes darting between the papers and Isabella. Then when Mr. Blake stepped toward the side table to pour himself a glass of water, Clarissa made her move. She reached across the table quickly, her hand hovering over the folder. Her fingers brushed the edge of the document packet. She glanced toward the door, then began to pull one of the papers closer. A faint mechanical whir broke the silence. A red light blinked from the corner of the room, the security camera. Mr. Blake turned sharply, his expression hardening in an instant. Miss Whitmore, he said, his voice cutting through the air like steel. Step back from those documents, now. Clarissa jerked her hand away as if burned. Her face flushed crimson. Victoria stood abruptly. What is happening? Mr. Blake walked calmly back to the table, but his tone was firm. Your daughter just attempted to interfere with legal documents under active probate. This room is monitored for security purposes, and that footage is admissible in court. Clarissa's voice came out in a shaky whisper. I was just looking. You were not just looking, Mr. Blake said evenly. You were reaching for documents that do not belong to you in a secured legal environment. That constitutes tampering. Ethan stood as well, his face pale. She didn't mean anything by it. Mr. Blake's gaze did not waver. Intent is irrelevant. The act itself is what matters. Any attempt to alter, remove, or photograph these documents without authorization can result in criminal charges. The room fell into suffocating silence. Clarissa's hands trembled visibly now. She looked to her mother, then to Ethan, but no one came to her defense. They were all too stunned. Victoria's voice cracked. This is absurd. We are family. We have a right to know. You have no rights to this estate. Mr. Blake interrupted calmly. None of you do. The will is explicit, legal, and final, and any further attempt to interfere will result in immediate legal action. Isabella remained seated, her expression unreadable. She had not moved. She had not flinched. She simply watched as the mask of civility crumbled from the faces of the people who had tormented her for years. Mr. Blake closed the folder with a quiet snap. I will give you all a moment to compose yourselves. But let me be clear. This meeting is concluded. Any disputes can be filed through proper legal channels. Attempting to manipulate or access these files again will not be tolerated. He stepped out of the room, leaving the family alone in the thick, toxic silence. Victoria turned on Isabella immediately. You planned this, she hissed. You orchestrated this entire thing. Isabella rose slowly from her seat. Her voice was soft but steady. No, my father did. I just stopped pretending I was nothing. Ethan stepped forward, his voice desperate. Isabella, please, let's talk about this. We can figure something out. There is nothing to figure out, she said simply. This was never yours, and I am done pretending it was. She picked up the folder, held it close, and walked toward the door. Clarissa stood frozen, her face streaked with humiliation. Victoria's hands shook with rage she could not release. Ethan reached out, but Isabella had already stepped into the hallway. Behind her, the Whitmores stood in ruins, not because of what they had lost, but because of what they had revealed. And Isabella Munro, for the first time in years, walked forward without looking back. The drive back to the Whitmore mansion was suffocating. No one spoke. The silence was not peaceful. It was sharp, trembling, ready to snap. The air inside the car felt heavier with each passing mile, filled with unasked questions and emotions, clawing to escape. Isabella sat by the window, holding the folder of documents Mr. Blake had given her. She kept her gaze steady on the city rushing past outside. Her heartbeat was calm. She had expected chaos. She had expected disbelief. But the raw intensity she had seen in Ethan's eyes, the stunned horror on Victoria's face, the disbelief radiating from Clarissa, all confirmed what she had known for a long time. Their world had never included her. Now it would never control her. When the car turned into the long driveway, Victoria finally broke the silence with a sharp, shaky breath. "This is not happening," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan opened his mouth but could not find anything to say. The car came to a stop, and the chauffeur stepped out to open the doors. The moment the doors clicked shut behind them, Victoria's composure shattered like glass hitting marble. She turned on Isabella instantly. "You lied to us," she said, her voice rising uncontrollably. "You tricked this family. You manipulated all of us." Isabella stepped back slightly as they entered the foyer. "I did not lie." Clarissa followed behind her mother, almost shaking. "You let us treat you like you were nothing. You let us speak to you that way, all while knowing this. Why would you do that?" Isabella met her gaze calmly. "I owed you no explanation." Victoria's face twisted with disbelief. "You owed us everything. We gave you a place in this family." Isabella's eyes were still, her expression steady. "You gave me a place to stand, not a place to belong." Victoria let out a harsh sound, almost a laugh. "You wanted us to humiliate ourselves. You wanted to watch us fall. You orchestrated this entire thing." "No," Isabella replied evenly. "My father did." The truth only enraged Victoria further. She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You expect us to believe that this was chance? You allowed us to believe you were beneath us." "I never said that," Isabella answered, her voice calm but firm. "You assumed it." Clarissa's face turned red. "You have been laughing at us behind our backs." "You must have been." Isabella shook her head once. "I did not need to laugh. Your actions spoke for themselves." Her tone was not mocking. It was honest. That honesty stung more than any insult could. Ethan finally stepped forward, trying to smooth the air with his hands. "Everyone, calm down. We can talk this through. There must be a way to understand how this happened." Victoria spun around. "Understand? Our son married a woman who is now richer than all of us combined. She has control over more money than we have ever touched. Do you think she will stay quiet now?" Ethan swallowed hard, then looked at Isabella with a strange smile. "We do not have to think of this as a problem. We can see it as an opportunity for us, for the marriage." Isabella saw through him immediately. The tone was gentle, the expression soft, but none of it came from love. It came from fear. It came from greed pulling his strings. It came from the sudden realization that she held the power he had always assumed he had over her. She did not move away when he took her hand. She simply looked at him. "Isabella," he said softly, almost pleading. "Why did you not tell me? We could have built something together." "We already tried to build something together," she replied. "But you built a life on your mother's opinions, not on your own choices." Ethan swallowed. "Please, we can start again." "No," Isabella said. "We cannot." Clarissa stepped forward, her voice shrill. "So what now? You walk around here acting like you own this place?" Isabella turned toward her. "I have never acted that way. But you always feared that someone different from you could ever stand beside you." Victoria's breathing quickened. "How dare you speak to us like this?" Isabella's voice remained steady. "I'm speaking to you with the same respect you have shown me since the first day I entered this house." Victoria flinched as if struck. Isabella looked at the three of them standing together, united by entitlement and fear. For the first time since she had married into this family, she felt no fear of them, only clarity. She took one step forward. Her tone was soft, but each word carried weight. "All this time, you thought I had nothing. You thought I was nothing. But today, it is not my worth that has been revealed. It is your character." The words hung in the air like a verdict delivered by fate itself. Ethan's face drained of color. He reached out toward her. "Isabella, please do not say things you will regret." She looked at his hand, then back at his face. "I do not regret telling the truth." Victoria pressed her fingers into her temples. "This is not over. You will not walk into this house and talk to us as if you are superior." Isabella shook her head gently. "I am not superior. I am simply done being silent." A heavy quiet spread through the foyer. Even Clarissa stepped back as if unsure whether to speak again. Ethan whispered her name once more, but she had already turned away. Isabella climbed the staircase with calm, deliberate steps. She did not rush. She did not tremble. Behind her, the three Whitmores stood frozen in the echo of her words, each one cut open by truth sharper than any insult they had ever thrown at her. When she reached the top of the stairs, she looked back only once, not at them, but at the space between them. The distance had been there all along. She walked into her room, closing the door gently behind her. Her father's will had changed the power in the house, but her voice had changed the truth in it. Tonight she would begin to pack, and tomorrow she would not be living here. The door to Isabella's bedroom closed softly behind her, but the energy in her body did not soften. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the certainty that she had reached a point of no return. The room felt different tonight. It no longer felt like a place she was forced to fit into. It felt like a place she would leave behind. She walked toward the closet and pulled out two large suitcases. The sound of the zippers sliding open seemed to echo louder than her own breath. She paused for a moment, grounding herself. This was her room for now, but not her home. It never had been. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. She glanced at the screen. It was a contact she had relied on for years, long before marriage had ever entered her life. The woman's name appeared clearly, Margaret Hughes, a relocation manager she had worked with while planning her father's investments. Margaret was the kind of professional who handled everything with quiet precision. She was not a friend, but she was someone Isabella trusted. Isabella answered the call. "Margaret, Miss Monroe?" Margaret greeted warmly. "Your attorney contacted me. I understand you require an immediate relocation." "Yes," Isabella replied. "I need a team here today if possible. I want my belongings packed and transported to the penthouse I secured 2 months ago." Margaret did not sound surprised. "Of course, I can have a crew available within 2 hours." "Would you like us to handle all personal items or only essentials?" "Everything I purchased myself," Isabella said. "Leave anything that belongs to the Whitmore family." "Understood. You will receive a confirmation message shortly." Isabella hung up and let the silence settle again. She opened her closet and began pulling clothes from the hangers, one piece at a time, folding each item neatly into the suitcase. Every movement felt intentional, like a statement she no longer needed to say out loud. Downstairs, muffled voices rose sharply. She recognized Victoria's piercing tone and Clarissa's mixture of outrage and disbelief. Their panic had begun. As she continued packing, her phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made her chest soften slightly. Mr. Harrison Blake, her lawyer. The man who had guided her through the long legal process of establishing her independence. He had been her father's legal partner for years and had become a quiet mentor to her in his own way. She answered, "Mr. Blake, Miss Monroe," he said, his voice steady. "I assume you are preparing to leave." "Yes, I will file the initial divorce paperwork today." He continued, "You are entitled to full legal protection. If your husband attempts to negotiate privately, I urge you not to respond without my counsel." "Thank you," Isabella replied. "I do not intend to handle anything through him." "You are making the right decision," he assured her. "If you need additional security or privacy measures, I can coordinate them." "I appreciate that," she said gently. "But I am all right." She ended the call and resumed packing, folding her favorite blazer and placing it carefully on top of the stack. The blazer represented the woman she had been before marriage. Ambitious, driven, confident, she felt that side of herself returning as she worked. Footsteps moved quickly up the stairs. She did not look toward the door. She knew who it was before he even knocked. Ethan pushed the door open without waiting for permission. His face looked strained, as if he had run up the steps. His eyes darted to the open suitcases, then back to her. "Isabella," he breathed out, "you are packing." "Yes," she said without turning. "I am leaving." He stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. "You cannot make this kind of decision in the heat of the moment." "I am not making it in the heat of the moment," she replied. "I made this decision the first time you let your mother insult me in front of strangers. The rest only confirmed it." Ethan moved closer. "I am sorry for what she said. She was upset. It was not about you. It was always about me," Isabella said. "You stood beside her every time." He ran his hand through his hair, frustration boiling. "I was trying to keep the peace." "You kept her peace," Isabella corrected. "Not mine." He reached for her arm, but she stepped away. "Isabella, please listen. We can fix this. We can talk to my mother. We can create new boundaries." She closed a suitcase with a firm motion. "Your mother has no boundaries, and you never enforced any." Ethan's voice cracked. "Are you really leaving all of this behind? The life we built?" She finally turned to him. Her eyes were steady, not cold, but resolved. "We did not build a life. I tried to build one. You let your family shape it instead." Ethan's desperation deepened. "You cannot throw our marriage away." "I am not throwing anything away," she said quietly. "I am walking away from what has already been broken." He fell silent. The realization settled on him heavily. Isabella returned to packing. "My lawyer will contact yours. There is no need for us to negotiate anything directly." He shook his head slowly. I do not want a divorce. She met his gaze. You do not want to lose access. That is not true, he said too quickly. It is, she replied. Ethan did not deny it. He looked helpless, lost, the mask of control slipping from his face. He stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to stop her. After a moment, he whispered, Isabella, what changed you? She zipped the second suitcase and lifted her chin. I changed myself. The sound of wheels rolling on the marble floor filled the room as she pulled the suitcase toward the door. Ethan stepped aside involuntarily, as if her presence pushed him back without force. She paused at the threshold of the bedroom. The room looked cleaner now, almost hollow. She took off her wedding ring. For a moment, she held it between her fingers, feeling the cold metal against her skin. She walked to the vanity, placed the ring gently on the wooden surface, and set it beside the old dress Clarissa had forced on her for the gala. It was not revenge. It was closure. When Isabella rolled her suitcases down the stairs, Victoria and Clarissa were waiting at the bottom. They looked startled, as if they had expected a fight, a dramatic outburst, a scene fitting their world of theatrics. But Isabella simply passed them. Their eyes followed her, but she did not acknowledge them. The front door opened, and sunlight poured in, touching her face with a warmth she had not felt in a long time. For a brief second, she inhaled deeply and let the fresh air settle in her lungs. Then she stepped outside. Behind her, the door closed with a quiet thud. It was the softest sound she had ever heard in this house, but it carried the weight of an ending. She walked forward without hesitation toward a life that finally belonged to her. 6 months had passed since the day Isabella Munro walked out of the Whitmore mansion and closed the door on a life that had never truly welcomed her. The world she stepped into afterward was brighter, sharper, and entirely her own. Her office sat on the top floor of a modern glass building overlooking the city. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, spreading across polished floors and minimalist furniture. The workspace radiated clarity and purpose. Every detail reflected her new life, her new identity, and her new mission. This was the headquarters of the Munro Foundation, the organization she established in honor of her father. The foundation existed for one reason: to support, mentor, and invest in women of color who had dreams but lacked systemic support. It was exactly the kind of work Isabella wanted to dedicate her life to. It was the kind of work Robert Munro had believed she was capable of. She stood near the window with a file in her hands, reading through the details of a new proposal. Her posture was confident, yet relaxed, a contrast to the cautious woman who once walked lightly through the Whitmore home. In this place, she no longer hid her strength. She lived it. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Miss Munro, may I come in?" a warm voice asked. Isabella looked up and smiled when she saw Sophia Carter enter. Sophia was in her early 30s, sharp-minded and empathetic, the foundation's deputy director and one of the first people Isabella hired. Sophia had worked with several nonprofit groups before joining the foundation and quickly became Isabella's trusted partner. "Of course," Isabella said. "Come in." Sophia closed the door behind her and approached the desk. "We have everything ready for the presentation downstairs. The applicants are a little nervous but excited." "Good. They should be excited. Today matters." Sophia hesitated for a moment. "Are you ready?" Isabella looked out the window again. "I am more than ready." They headed downstairs to the main conference hall, where a group of women sat waiting. Some looked anxious, others determined. Each woman carried a folder, a dream, and months of preparation. The Foundation's monthly grant program awarded capital to women with business ideas that could reshape their communities. When Isabella entered, the room quieted with admiration and gratitude. She greeted each woman warmly, shaking their hands and listening to their introductions. She moved to the front of the room. "Thank you all for being here. Today you will present your visions, your plans, and the futures you want to build. This space is safe. There is no judgment here, only opportunity. Nervous smiles filled the room. One by one, the presentations began. Isabella listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions, offering encouragement, and noting potential challenges. Sophia took notes beside her, occasionally whispering insights. As the final presentation ended, the applicants stepped out to allow the board a moment to deliberate. Sophia turned to Isabella. "They are remarkable. Each one deserves support." "They do," Isabella agreed. But one stood out. She tapped the folder of a young woman named Maya Brooks, a 26-year-old entrepreneur with an innovative idea to bring accessible financial literacy programs to underrepresented communities. Maya had spoken with a quiet but fierce determination that reminded Isabella of her younger self. "She is ready," Isabella said. Sophia smiled. "Then let us bring her back in." A few minutes later, Maya walked in again, wringing her hands nervously. Isabella approached her with a gentle smile. "Maya," she said, "your vision, your commitment, and your resilience show exactly the kind of leadership we created this foundation to support." Maya blinked quickly, fighting back tears. "Thank you. I was not sure if I was good enough." Isabella shook her head. "Do not say that. You are more than enough." She handed Maya a large envelope with the foundation's seal. "Congratulations! The Monroe Foundation is awarding you full funding for your project." Maya covered her face with her hands as tears slipped through her fingers. Sophia placed a comforting hand on her back, and Isabella held Maya's shoulder gently. "Thank you," Maya whispered. "I will not waste this chance." Isabella's voice was calm. "Your value was never the issue. You only needed someone to invest in it." After the ceremony, as the recipients left the building with bright faces and renewed spirits, Isabella returned to her office. She closed the door softly behind her and stood still for a long moment. Her past did not haunt this room. It did not control her anymore. It existed only as a reminder of everything she had overcome. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from a news outlet. She opened it absent-mindedly, but the headline caused her to pause. "Whitmore family faces financial strain as investors withdraw support." The article detailed how rumors of their treatment of Isabella and the revelation of her inheritance had spread through their social circles. Business partners grew distant. Social invitations dwindled. Confidence in their family's leadership structures weakened. There was no malice in Isabella's expression as she read, no satisfaction, only a calm acceptance that actions always carried consequences. Later that evening, Sophia returned to the office with one last update. "Do you want to see tomorrow's schedule before you leave?" "Yes," Isabella said. Sophia handed her a printed sheet and lingered for a moment. "You know," she said gently, "your father would be proud. You have created something extraordinary." Isabella looked at her hands. They were steady, strong, and unbound. "I hope so," she whispered. Sophia stepped out, and for a moment Isabella stood alone. She approached the window and gazed out at the city lights. They shimmered like a promise. Her life was no longer defined by silence, pain, or endurance. It was defined by purpose. She had taken her father's legacy and transformed it into power, not for herself, but for others who needed it. This was her dawn, not a rebirth of who she had been, but the full emergence of who she always was. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered softly to the night, "Onward."